Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this webinar by the Hindu on tackling the binge, learning to handle addictive behavior. The panelists will discuss with us how and why addictive patterns in food emerge, what are the reasons for cravings, how emotions influence our choices, how habits are formed, and the habits that we form, how do we have difficulty in breaking them. The panelists will also explain the tools to help navigate difficult to break habits and how families can be supported. We have with us three panelists, a pediatrician cum diabetologist, a bariatric surgeon, and a psychiatrist. Dr. Lakshmi Venkatraman is a consultant psychiatrist and assistant director of Psychosocial Rehabilitation Services at Schizophrenia Research Foundation, that we know as SCARF. She brings over 2 decades of clinical experience across India and the United Kingdom, with a strong focus on psychosocial interventions for severe mental illness. She's also worked in eating disorder services in the United Kingdom. She's contributed to the field through multiple research publications and remains actively engaged in developing and delivering mental health training for diverse groups, from professionals and caregivers to community organizations. Dr. R.M. Anjana. He is a pediatrician and managing director of Dr. Mohan's Diabetes Specialities Center, which is an international diabetes federation center of excellence in diabetes care. She is also the president of the Madras Diabetes Research Foundation, which is an Indian Council of Medical Research ICMR Center of Excellence, and Asia's largest standalone diabetes research center. Dr. Anjana's main research interests are epidemiology of diabetes, nutrition, physical activity, and translational research and technology related to diabetes. She's an expert panel member in the World Health Organization, WHO, selection and prioritization of global diabetes monitoring framework. Health and Wellness Centers and a member of, it's GDMF Health and Wellness Centers, and a member of the Scientific Advisory Committee of the ICMR National Center for Disease Informatics and Research. She is an adjunct faculty in the Department of Medical Science and Technology, the Indian Institute of Technology, Madras. Dr. P. Praveen Raj is a consultant and head of the Department of Minimal Access Bariatric and Robotic Surgery in the Department of Surgical Gastroenterology, GEM Hospital and Research Center, Coimbatore. He is the immediate past president of Obesity Surgery Society of India and president International Excellence Federation for Bariatric Surgery, India chapter. He is the sectional editor of Bariatric Surgery of the Journal of Minimal Access Surgery. He has authored a book on the subject, besides initiating childhood obesity prevention in schools in Coimbatore. Welcome, doctors, and I would like Dr. Lakshmi Venkatraman to start by explaining to us what exactly is this binge eating and how it starts. What are the ramifications?
Good morning, everyone. And thank you, Ms. Sujatha, for that introduction. And special thanks to the Hindu for organizing such an important seminar on binge eating. Having worked in the field of eating disorders, I think it is very important for everyone to know what it is about and how to manage it. So thank you for organizing this. I would like to start by asking everyone to think about any moment in your life where you have found yourself eating more than what you wanted to eat. Often when you're feeling lonely or when you are feeling stressed or quite late in the night. Sometimes it starts to become a pattern that is very difficult to stop. It's very common though, and sometimes we don't quite understand what it is about. So what I'm hoping to do in the next 10 minutes is just tell you a little bit about what binge eating is all about, why does it happen, and what can be done to help. Now, what is binge eating? Binge eating means a person eats quite a large quantity of food within a short span of time and has this associated sense that one is not able to stop themselves from doing it. And this is actually very different from overeating, which we sometimes do in situations like celebrations or marriage, which is part of our culture and quite normal. What happens in binge eating is that people tend to eat very fast, eat even when they're not actually feeling hungry. And most times, this is done in secrecy, and the food that they eat is often hidden away. And once they have had this large quantity of food in a very short span of time, the person feels very guilty and upset that they have done this. And they kind of have the sense of, I'm not able to control what I'm doing. It's very important to know that binge eating is not something which happens in a very specific group of population. This can happen for anybody. It can happen in both men and women. It can happen in children, adolescents, adults, and it can also happen in people of any body size or shape. And it is not something which just happens to a particular class of the society or to a specific group of population. And it also doesn't mean that the person somehow doesn't have the willpower to control this. It's just that there are lots of factors which make someone uh, enter into a binge eating pattern. um, if we look at the common reasons why people engage in binge eating, the commonest ones tend to be emotional factors. People who are stressed, who are anxious, who are feeling bored or lonely can often end up not knowing how to manage these emotions. And food becomes a common way to help control the emotions that people feel. The other important factor which contributes to binge eating is how we handle food. When people enter into extreme dieting patterns or miss meals, then this can contribute to binge eating as well. Because when the body is very starved, the brain pushes the person to eat fast and eat large quantity of food. So dieting and restriction can also be a big factor contributing to binge eating. There are also lots of cultural factors. When there is a lot of focus in the environment on food, on weight, on body shape, or eating habits, this can contribute to the person entering into a mode of guilt when they want to eat, and they can be doing a lot of secretive eating. Sometimes underlying mental health issues like depression or anxiety disorder can also contribute to binge eating patterns. So, binge eating, like I said, is something which uh, happens due to a multitude of factors, and often many of these factors come together in an individual before they start entering into this binge eating patterns. So, why is it that we are talking about binge eating? What does it do to us? Now, there are two aspects of us. One is our emotional aspect, and the other one is the physical aspect. So, physically, it can cause a lot of weight issues. It can cause problems with our blood sugar control. It can cause even high blood pressure, and even our digestive tract can have problems because of the binge eating behavior that one engages in. And psychologically, it makes the person feel very guilty about what they're doing. It reduces their self esteem, and it kind of makes them feel quite ashamed of themselves. What often happens is when a person is feeling bad, right? Negative emotions, this leads to the binges. And because of the binges, the person feels worse, and because they're feeling worse, they binge again. So the person enters into a cycle of feeling bad, binge, bad, more and more binges. So what can be done to reduce or manage binge eating? There are some very simple, straightforward things one can do to stop binging, and that is to eat quite regularly, not to skip meals. Long gaps in the eating can actually promote binges. Having regular meals really helps. Also, having food segregated into good and bad food is not helpful. Have all foods, have favorite foods, but obviously in moderation. The other important thing is about emotions, right? Because emotion is what drives the binge eating most often. So, learning to recognize our own emotions, whether we are eating because we are physically hungry or we are emotionally driving the wanting to eat. Once we recognize that it is emotions that are driving us wanting to eat, then we need to find alternative ways of managing those emotions rather than looking to food to help us manage those difficult emotions. The other important thing is reducing triggers. So, not storing those foods. Often, when people are binging, it's often very specific types of foods. So, foods that people ban themselves from. People say, this food is particularly forbidden for me. I will not eat ice creams at all. So, whenever that trigger is there, whenever there's some ice cream in the food, they tend to binge. So do not store those foods that are triggers at home in large quantities. It's okay to eat at a moderate quantity at social occasions, but don't store those foods. The other thing is to learn how to manage difficult emotions. So there are different ways. Maybe taking a short walk, listening to music, talking to someone, trying deep breathing. All these are helpful strategies one can do when they recognize that they're feeling emotional and that's why they're wanting to eat. Um, the other important thing is being mindful when we are trying to eat, not really sitting in front of TV or doing other things while we are eating. So we are eating slower, we are focusing on what we are eating, and taking it quite slow can be very helpful. Sometimes when the person is having an uncontrolled pattern of eating over an extended period of time and it is happening repeatedly, it's okay to seek help. There are psychiatrists and psychologists who can help people manage the binge eating, and it is important to really take help. So I'm going to conclude by saying that binge eating is quite common, but it is something which can be managed. And it's often not just about food, it's a lot about the mental well being. So if we are able to manage our mental health better, then we can manage binge eating well. Thank you very much for this opportunity. Over to you, Ms. Sujatha.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much. That was quite informative. And yes, we know all of the issues that we are talking about, but it is very difficult to control our urges. I would actually put it as urges. Yes, we know that it is better to eat regular meals instead of eating at one go and not storing. Good point is not storing the food that you like a lot in large quantities at home, which means you have to actually walk down or make sure you have to make order from somewhere to eat it. Thank you very much. And you touched upon the issue of diabetes. I would like Dr. Anjana to take over from here. Dr. Anjana, please.
Thank you, Ms. Sujatha. It was wonderful. It was a treat listening to Dr. Lakshmi. While I love to treat children, unfortunately, I'm not a pediatrician. I'm a diabetologist. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to share some slides, which I hope you can see. Are you able to see these slides?
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Yeah, okay. So I think the topic was tackling the binge, learning to handle these addictive behaviors. So, ma'am so beautifully talked about this. What is binge eating? By definition, these are recurrent episodes of consuming unusually large amounts of food in a short period of time, accompanied by a sense of loss of control over this eating. And I think all of us face this. It's not something that is new. The diagnostic criteria is called the DSM-5 criteria, where we have these 5 criteria that we talk about. So I think ma'am touched upon all of these. So eating in a short period of time, larger quantities than most people would eat, and then having this lack of control over eating is the primary one. But there are other criteria as well: eating more rapidly than normal, eating until feeling uncomfortably full, eating large amounts of food when really not hungry at all, being embarrassed by how much one is eating. And then there's this feeling of guilt, depression, disgusted after overeating. All of these, 3 of these make the criteria 2. There's a marked distress that comes with this binge eating, either feeling sad or overwhelmed or depressed or guilty also happens after eating. The frequency is also important. So by definition, at least once a week for 3 months. It could be more days in a week for longer periods of time, but by definition, at least once a week for 3 months. And there are other types of eating disorders as well, what we know as bulimia, anorexia, etc. So in those kinds of eating disorders, after eating, this is associated with either vomiting or purging or taking some drugs that will help you to purge or whatever. So those shouldn't be there inside of the binge eating disorder. So when you don't have those, you can diagnose. So this is a general rule that happens for binge eating. So now what happens when you start taking large amounts of food over a short period of time and you keep doing that recurrently over and over? I'm a person who deals with metabolic health. So I'm going to talk less about the psychological issues and more about the metabolic issues. The first and foremost thing is that you start storing excess fat. Your calorie load is going up. So you start storing excess fat. This fat is initially stored, utilized as much as needed. You obviously have excess of needs. It gets stored in the subcutaneous space. You overcome that and then start storing inside of your organs, which then starts causing all of this damage. So you can get obesity, which is very, very commonly associated with binge eating, but you can also have diabetes, cholesterol, high blood pressure, gallbladder disease, cardiac problems, some types of cancer, in addition to all of the psychological issues that you also get. So what is this link between binge eating and metabolic health? There's a lot of science in this, not going into all of that. Just to let you know, overall, when you're eating all of these stuff, fat kind of accumulates. I described that earlier. So you first utilize what your body needs. Very soon you have much more than you need for metabolic functioning. So it starts getting accumulated. Once it goes and sits, it goes from the subcutaneous into the liver, pancreas, kidney, etc. The normal functioning of these organs is then affected. And fat on the liver can cause diabetes, insulin resistance. Fat on the pancreas can prevent insulin secretion, etc., leading to all of the other problems. So I'm going to show you primarily some data supporting all of this before we go into therapies. So this is data from the National ICMR India Diabetes Study, or INDIAB study for short. This is funded by the Indian Council of Medical Research and Department of Health Research, Government of India. It's a national study on diabetes. And we show that there's a lot of metabolic disease in this country. We have 101 million people with diabetes, 136 million with pre-diabetes. Hypertension is 315, but look at abdominal adiposity or obesity, or in Tamil we say toppe for simple ways. So that is 350 million. And this is very, very important, because when we look at obesity, primarily from the West, we learn to look at BMI. So we have BMI cutoffs that talk about 23 being overweight, 25 being obese, etc. But in India, we now know that there are people with normal or even low BMI that have metabolic obesity. We have published from InDiab itself a category of people called as mono, metabolically obese, non-obese. So they have normal BMI, but they have a lot of metabolic obesity, which means they're carrying fat inside of the abdomen, in the liver and other places. They could be having hypertension, or glucoses are high. The lipids are abnormal. So this is a very high risk of cardiovascular disease, kidney disease, etc. So this is very, very high. This mono component across every single state, across urban areas, rural area, men and women, it's the number one cause of metabolic obesity. So among all the types of obesity we have, mono is the highest across the country. The other thing that we find is that the age of onset of diabetes in our population is shifted to left and is very young, in the age group of 25 to 34 years. So if you go to any Western population, diabetes starts only 50 plus. But here you'll see that at 25 years, now it's moving to teenage also. And shown here is data from InDiab, which shows it doesn't matter if you're living in an urban area, shown in red, or rural area, shown in green. Doesn't matter if you're a man, solid line, dotted line is the woman. The take-off point or start point for diabetes. And people keep asking me, doctor, why is there so much of diabetes? See, obesity is a precursor to diabetes. And the more abdominal or adiposity you have and you start accumulating, which you start accumulating even in childhood now. So after 5-10 years of having this, our genes are such that we start manifesting diabetes pretty early. And we now know that with diabetes, uncontrolled diabetes, you start developing the complications. So when you put all of that together, it seems like this obesity is a primary problem for all of the things that come after it. We've also published to show, is there anything that we can do particularly to prevent diabetes? And we show among all the things for prevention, diet and physical activity alone, just these two factors on its own can prevent 50% of all diabetes. If you can see here, this is the first one, 50% just from diet and physical activity. So now let's look at eating disorders in diabetes. And this is data which was published in 2022, which shows that binge eating per se contributes to about 15 to 20% of all type 2 diabetes. So we're not looking at the obesity risk. So it's binge eating alone that's contributing to about 20% of all diabetes. And you can see that it's higher in men. I actually thought it would be higher in women, but actually it's higher in men than it is in women. Now let's look at children. It's very important to look at children for the reasons I stated above, that the obesity in children is becoming much more than it is in adults. And they're starting quite young, and they're progressing over a lifetime into metabolic disease that is starting so much earlier. So these are publications from our group that has come earlier that has shown that overweight and obesity is about 20% in children right now. And this was published in 2016. These numbers are increasing. Even in schools, you will see that obesity is becoming a big problem. This is a study I'm quite proud of. It's done by my son, actually. Where he looked at eating disorders as part of his psychology work to look at in 219 adolescents aged 13 to 17 from both government and private schools in Chennai. So what we looked at is we asked these questions. Do you find yourself eating large amounts of food in short periods of time? And more boys, 20% of boys and 15% of girls reported frequently. And another 26% boys and 22% girls said occasionally. So if you add those, that's almost 50% of children who are even agreeing. So there is a lot of stigma with binge eating. Mal earlier mentioned how they hide the food and they are ashamed of what there is. So there's a lot of stigma that's associated with binge eating. But even then, about 50%, 40 to 50% of children are saying that, yes, they do, have this problem. Do you restrict your food intake in order to control your weight? Again, we have children reporting, about again 40% of children reporting that, and there's a lot of peer pressure around all of this. I would have actually thought this is more for girls in terms of body image, body size. Ma'am started off by saying that is irrespective of body image and size. That is absolutely true. Even those who are quite thin can have these eating disorders. Those who are overweight or obese can also have these eating disorders. It's quite agnostic of the body size, actual body size, or BMI. We also started asking questions about awareness in the community. And some people said no. A lot of people were unsure about it. But about 50% of boys said that they were aware about these binge eating habits. We then asked how comfortable they were with discussing their eating habits. 30 to 40% were comfortable, another 30% were neutral. So they didn't wish to answer about that particular question. So there's so much going on with this in childhood per se. What about eating disorders and risk of non-communicable diseases? Here we were talking particularly about the metabolic non-communicable diseases, obesity, diabetes, hypertension, etc. Did these children know about it? That was very striking because most of them said don't know what happens. You don't know about diabetes, obesity, etc. So even among those who talked about, said yes, said they knew, the only thing they knew is that this would lead to obesity. So there's not much awareness about binge eating overall in the community. This is among adolescents currently. So then the question on whether we can prevent NCDs in the community, a lot of them were just like, don't know, have no clue about this at all. So what this is saying overall is that about 50% of our children agree that there is a problem with binge eating and eating as we define as binge eating, but they don't know what the links are, what will happen. Yes, you may gain some weight, but what is NCD? Does it link to that? Is there a problem in later life? Are there psychological issues? Is there community awareness? None of this exists right now. So both among adults and children, we do have a larger problem with binge eating. So now this takes us to treatment options. So in order to treat, one must first know that there's a problem. So awareness, I think, is the first step, and you have to start young. You have to start in childhood, start telling them without stigmatizing or judging. So the whole thing is not about, oh, why are you eating so much? Are you a glutton? That kind of stigma needs to be removed. And rather, ma'am said that so beautifully, where she said, find out what is causing. There are always stressors. It doesn't matter if adult or child. There are triggers. There are stressors. A lot of this has nothing to do about food, and it has everything to do about the emotion. So there is a stress factor that is driving. It could be an exam, it could be a life issue, it could be bereavement, it could be job, it could be anything. So tackling that and having someone talk about that, identifying that as the issue, I think, is the first step. What can we do? Of course, dietary modification. So oftentimes these dietary modifications are a balance. So like ma'am saying, the dietary change, especially since we deal with diabetes and hypertension, we're talking about no sugar, no salt, no nothing. So this becomes an extreme stress factor leading to binges all the time. We see people feeling like a failure, not able to control, sugars going up, etc. I think it's very, very important to be supportive in these and try to get nutritional balance into the system with a little bit. So a lot of this is hedonic pleasure as well. So and also traditionally in our country, festivals and everything good is celebrated with food and sweets and stuff like that. So I think changing that environment where it's okay to be sad but not eat, it's okay to see a movie but not eat that popcorn, and it's okay to go to a function and not eat sweet. I think it's important to bring that as a social norm, prevent all of those triggers, and each time recognizing that trigger is the first step to treatment. there are lots of these therapies, your cognitive behavioral therapy. They're very, very effective in treating things like CBT because they're often dealing with the primary issue. But distraction is also a very important one. For example, other than it, everybody has a hobby, right? It could be drawing, it could be painting, dancing, singing, it could be photography, it could be anything. Like people have multitude of hobbies which give pleasure. So that same hedonic pleasure you can get from a hobby that is close to your heart. So instead, every time you're upset, instead of going to food, look for another activity that will give you that sense of pleasure or helps you cope or deal with whatever you're dealing with. It could be running, it could be anything. That has a very good effect in cutting down on binge. Now, when you look at drugs, there are a whole lot of drugs that are available. And then there's weight loss surgery, which Praveen is going to talk about. These are things primarily for the physician to use. But and some of them are effective in the diabetes space. We do have drugs now, the GLP-1 analogs, that help to cut the sense of, not only makes you full, it gives you satiety, but it also helps with the cravings. It helps you to stop thinking about food, works on the brain, works on the gut, etc. All of these things are available now for us. But the thing is, unless you target the primary issue, all these have a minimal and temporary effect. You will bypass all of these things. I've seen people bypassing even bariatric surgery. So all of these things can be, unless you treat the main primary issue. And the good thing is that it is treatable and you can treat it at any age. The earlier, the better. And trying to deal with that primary issue will go a long way in treating and helping these people. So binge eating disorder is an underreported and underdiagnosed problem associated with all kinds of metabolic disorders, including increase in body fat. We have enormous amounts of diabetes and other metabolic NCDs. We don't need another disorder contributing to this right now. Diet and physical activity are very underutilized therapies. They're actually the best therapies for everything that I just spoke about. We have multiple options for behavioral intervention, but I think the most powerful are the behavioral interventions. Awareness about all this is low. So early identification, diversion, early medication use, reaching out to people will allow for timely intervention. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Anjana. Thank you. That was really good. A lot of things. Again, we have seen the repetition of what Dr. Lakshmi also said. How to take care of yourself, how to be part of a society, knowing where to stop, when to stop, and how to be active. Now, actually, when you were both talking, the one thing that I was thinking is when I was younger, when I was in school, we had time to go play. And as I was growing up, I saw when I came to college, most of the students had laptops. I'm sorry, at that time it was only PC, personal computers. And now, of course, it's laptop and iPads and whatever. So it appears that most children have not gone out to play. And I see very few children out there playing. And those children who are playing, they have no problems at all. At least they are healthy, they are happy. And even if they go binge eat, it's not a big deal, I guess. I would like Dr. Praveen Raj to tell us where exactly, at what age do really are children actually getting into the stage where they need bariatric surgery, or is there a possibility that we can cut that idea at all? Although you are a specialist there.
So thank you, Mrs. Sujatha, and good morning, friends. And I think it's wonderful to share screen along with Dr. Lakshmi Venkatraman, I think, who highlighted the importance of the psychological aspects and what needs to be done in that sense on these young kids and adolescents. I think she brought it up beautifully well. And again, happy to co-panel with Dr. Anjana after a long time. And of course, she just, I think, made our job quite easy also at one end, but also she has covered most of the aspects. So leaving us with probably the surgical side. But of course, although I'm a surgeon, I would not just jump into surgery because that is not something anybody would walk in, you're binging, okay, let's operate you. So that's not the way we look at how we look at our patients as such. And I think in continuing with Dr. Anjana, what she has said, I think she covered the issues of relationship, of metabolic issues to eating patterns, and how these metabolic abnormalities leads to diabetes and the different comorbidities, and the increasing prevalence among even the young kids. And I think it was wonderful to see her son study on the kids in school to look at when they binge, how they binge, kinds of eating patterns. So in that sense, I think just trying to bring all that together before I get into the interventions part. I think for the benefit of the audience now, we need to understand if somebody is binging, there can be two sides that we need to be looking at. One is the psychological side, whether they have a psychological component to it. Maybe it could be a short-term, some kind of a stress that they are going through, some personal issues in the school or at home, which could be corrected and they will stop. Or there could be a psychological or a psychiatric issue, which is like a binge eating syndrome or diseases that Dr. Anjana spoke to you about. So that identification is important by a clinician. It could be a pediatrician, it could be a family doctor, whomsoever. And then that treatment will go towards a child psychologist or a psychiatric side where we look at, or a psychiatrist where we look at treatment of this psychological component. Hence why we will address the binge eating pattern. So I will not get into that because Dr. Lakshmi has covered that quite well. Then the second component which Anjana touched was the pathological reasons or the metabolic reasons that somebody could be binging. I will just get, she had covered telling if binging or having an abnormal metabolism can lead to many other diseases. But again, there is a scientific component behind this metabolic issue or the pathological issue is there could be a lot of hormonal irregularities that these people could have. It could be kids or adolescent or adults, which could be a reason that they actually binge. Of course, I will not get too deep and make it very theoretical, but there are certain hormones that we need to understand is produced in our intestines, in our stomach, and in our fat, which regulates anorexia. Anorexia means the desire to eat. Not having the desire to eat. So that is called anorexia. Then there is something called appetite, the liking for food. We see something, we want to eat. Or when we see something, we don't want to eat. That is called appetite towards food. And the third thing is satiety. Satiety is a feeling of fullness. At what point after you start eating, are you starting to feel full? So there is a hormone called ghrelin that is related to appetite that is produced in our stomach. So this regulates our appetite. If the levels are very high, you have too much of an appetite. So you just want to eat anything and everything. But if the levels are low, then you probably want to eat lesser of something. Then there is something called peptide YY, which is produced in our intestines, or small intestines. That regulates anorexia, or the desire or not wanting to eat, etc. The desire to eat. That the levels of this peptide YY is lesser in most obese people compared to their thinner counterparts. So obviously the desire to eat is more high. So appetite is liking when you see something. This is desire to eat. That's called anorexia. Then there is third hormone called leptin, which is produced in our body fat. This regulates our satiety. But what happens in obese people is this hormone is not working efficiently. It is called leptin resistance. So when the hormones don't work efficiently, they don't achieve satiety. So this hormone regulates our satiety. Satiety is achieving the feeling of fullness after starting to eat. So let's say for me, I might achieve satiety at 3 idlis. If I'm having leptin resistance, maybe I might need 4, 5, 6, 7. I just keep eating and eating and eating. I just never feel full. Sometimes until we start puking. You're like, can't you control? Don't you know how much you want? Don't you know when to stop? We might be shouting at these kids or our friends, etc. But it is an hormonal dysregulation. It could be an hormonal dysregulation that has to be understood. So this is where we call it pathological reasons of eating disorders, not always psychological. So if this is not understood by specialists, if this is not picked up, then obviously we'll keep telling them, try this diet, do this kind of fasting. Why don't you do that? And obviously when this happens, it's always conflict. When it's always conflict, there is always a parental-kids discordance happens. The kids don't stop listening. The parents think the kids are very lazy. They're not taking any effort. They're demotivated. And that's when the conflicts even starts. They actually end up to the psychiatrist solving the interpersonal issues rather than actually solving the underlying problem as such. So if this is the reason, so once you rule out psychological reasons, then we need to understand, is this a pathological reason? And of course, doing these tests are very difficult because very, very few labs in the world does these tests. So you don't have to really do these tests to understand whether there is actually sitting down and talking with the patient itself. We will be able to understand, do they have a pathological abnormality that is making them eat more, making them have more appetite, making them not having satiety soon. So once this is understood, that is where we need to treat this medically, and then not just giving this ad hoc advices. You just go to weddings, you go outside, everybody gives free advices. Why don't you cut that? Why don't you cut this? Why don't you try this diet? I saw on YouTube, there was this video on intermittent fasting. Why could you do that? They just don't work unless we look at from a multidisciplinary standpoint. Multidisciplinary standpoint is all the specialists coming together and working it from 360-degree approach. Not just giving a diet counseling, not just giving a psychological advice, but dietitian being part of the role, a psychologist being part of the role, and doctors like us. Could be Anjana, a diabetologist, I could be a bariatric surgeon, all of us coming together, and we treat this patient from a 360-degree angle. Because one separately, if you want to push a car that is not working well, 4 people need to come together, then the job for all 4 is easy. If one by one tries to push, nobody will be able to get the result. Likewise, when we have this multidisciplinary approach, we will be able to address these patients easily, or not easily, at least effectively, because this requires a multitude of approach over disciplined approach over a long periods of time. So this is where if you just give a diet advice and stop, it may not work. You just give a psychological advice, you stop, it may not work. We will need clinicians to come in and take over because there is underlying abnormalities. So what as clinicians we can do? Of course, now I'm making sure diet is important, psychological component is important, plus medical management. Medical management can be in the form of medications that are available in the market. There are a lot of newer medications that are coming called semaglutide, called tirzepatide, a lot of newer molecules which are coming in, which are basically, I spoke to you about gut hormones, right? Of course, not these hormones. There are many other hormones like GLP-1, GIP. So these drugs work on these gut hormones, and hence they help attain improved satiety, help reduce the appetite levels, help improve anorexia levels, by which they can help in weight loss. So at initial parts, maybe the BMI is not so high, they are in the early phases. If we think they're having a metabolic issue or a pathological issue, then we can start medications along with diets and along with psychological component. Of course, the exercises part, I don't have to really stress the importance of it. But then again, that is why I'm saying it's a multidisciplinary approach. But if the BMIs are very high, which has come to a point that the obesity part is already causing problems to the body. Let's say the patient is having diabetes, that's very bad. Patients are having sleep apnea. Sleep apnea is a breathing disorder. They have severe snoring, or sometimes they have obesity hypoventilation, where the carbon dioxide levels are very high in their blood. These can be clinically dangerous to these people. So if obesity has come to a point that it is already causing problems or medical problems, then we need to intervene faster, because otherwise it could become life-threatening. So that is where we start considering bariatric surgery as an option. Again, bariatric surgery doesn't mean we just come, put in a knife and cut the stomach. No. There are multiple different types within bariatric surgery. There are endoscopic bariatric options. There are laparoscopic bariatric options. In endoscopic, what we call a balloon kind of an approach can be done, where it will occupy about 1/3 to 1/5, 1/3 to half of the stomach, so that their capacity is reduced. They may not overeat even if they want to. Then there is something called the endoscopic sleeve gastroplasty, where using a specialized equipment, we stitch the stomach from inside. We cause, basically the stomach is shortened, and also some hormonal changes happen that the appetite goes down. And of course, we have in bariatric, there are multiple different kinds of surgeries, which helps in reducing the ghrelin levels. I spoke to you earlier about that reduces appetite. It increases the peptide YY levels. It increases anorexia, and also the leptin resistance, which I've spoke to you for satiety, improves. They achieve early satiety. So bariatric is not meaning you just go cut the stomach, make the stomach smaller, they eat less. No. In bariatric, there are different types. The intent is modifying the gut hormones. By modifying the gut hormones, we can achieve these problematic hormones, which is causing this trouble, to get recorrected. Hence, we will be able to achieve these beneficial effects, which is the primary problem to start off with these patients. And that's how we intervene in these patients. So just because I'm a bariatric surgeon, anybody walks in, we wouldn't be operating. we run, I mean, our centers, all bariatric surgical centers, we have a multitude of approach. So starting from dietary part to medical part to the physical exercise part, and of course the psychological component, all this needs to be addressed. But if those are not helping us, then that's when we consider medical therapies or surgical therapies, depending on a case-to-case basis. So I think this was wonderfully, this seminar was designed very well, because we just spoke the importance of the psychological component, then the medical component, and I think I covered on the interventional component, because if this is how it has to be aligned in treatment of the patient. I think Dr. Lakshmi alone or Dr. Anjana alone or me alone cannot be able to achieve success. It's by this multitude approach we can. And in this sense, I think happy to be part of the seminar. I hope I could contribute some knowledge to the viewers out here. We'll be more than happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Praveen. Yes, you gave a wonderful explanation of how actually bariatrics, not everybody who walks in gets a bariatric surgery. And I like it that you touched on the aspect that you have to sit with your patient, talk to them and find out, instead of just sending them for tests. That was a very good approach that you've taken, because more often than not, we are scared to go to the doctor because the doctor will prescribe tests first. So here, there are a few questions here. Some of them, of course, actually, you've all already touched upon it, but we would still take the questions as they have come here. So there's this person who says, I have the habit of eating fruits mixed with chaat masala. I do this often during the day without any sense of hunger. So he has no hunger pangs, but he still wants to eat. And he does it 4 or 5 times. I think he means, hopefully it is not in the day. He says 4 to 5 times a day. Normally, when he's alone or during late at night, I thought it was a nutrition, it was a habit of, I think maybe he's lacking in nutrition. Does this also qualify under binge eating or unhealthy eating? He just wants to know. Who would like to take this question, Dr. Lakshmi?
Thank you. Like Dr. Anjana and I were saying earlier, there are very specific aspects to qualify to call something a binge. So is the person eating very fast? Is the person eating unusually large quantity of food, more than what anybody else would? And is this driven by hunger, or is it driven by something else? And are they able to stop when they want to? Is there a sense of guilt associated with doing something like that? If these questions are answered yes to, then we would call it a binge. Otherwise, it's not a binge.
Okay, thank you.
Usually, the type of foods people binge on tend to be more sugary and carbohydratey, but there are people who binge on other things as well. There's someone that I used to treat who used to binge on carrots and ended up with a very yellow skin. So you do see some unusual situations, but like I said, there are certain factors which are looked into before we call something as a binge.
Thank you, ma'am. I think there's another person, Deepak Gobia. He's addressed this question to you. And he says, how do you reduce overthinking and how to handle threats, types of activities performed by others which affects our mind and health?
Okay, so there are 2 parts to this question. One is about the thinking, and second is about the environmental effect on the thinking. And I think the overthinking, the best way to manage overthinking, if it's just I'm reading too much into what something is about, then the best thing is to try and slow down the thinking process, but by even becoming mindful of who I am, what I'm doing currently, what is happening around me. So trying to focus on the here and now, taking a deep breath, focusing on where am I sitting, what am I doing, who am I with, It helps slow down the process of thinking. But sometimes overthinking can mean a lot of different elements as well. Sometimes thinking happens as part of specific types of mental disorders. For example, someone who is quite depressed, or someone who is very anxious can also overthink. So if someone's overthinking feels as though they are not able to control, and it is affecting how they feel and operate in the world, what I would advise is that they go and see someone to talk this through, to understand whether this is a problem which needs more help from a specialist. What do you do about the environment, right? All of us have this question for ourselves. Sometimes the sad part is it's not very easy to manage the environment. When we often struggle to manage ourselves, how do we go about changing the environment? But the best thing to do is to see how we can educate people around us about what they do is doing to us. Whilst it's easier said than done, it's an important step that all of us need to take to be able to communicate to people around us that how they are is actually influencing how we feel. And sometimes it's important to tell people that, hey, what you're doing is making me upset, rather than say, I don't want you. Sometimes when you make it about the other person, then it's very hard for them to change themselves. They start becoming defensive. So, whilst these all seem very straightforward, it's something which takes a long time to bring about a change in the environment. And in the meantime, learning to manage ourselves is very important. And sometimes we all need help to do that. And it's okay to take help to manage how others behave with us.
Thank you, ma'am. There's a question for Dr. Anjana here. How do you control urges to bring about, if there, I mean, like, I think the idea is that people like to eat sweet at all ages, but then how do you control the urge to eat sweets? And at any age, that's his question.
That's a really good question. So now again, it depends on whether you have diabetes or not. That's one of the first questions that I would ask. So the one part is the sweet part. The second part is the urge part. So there's two parts to that question. Now, as far as the sugar goes, and if you're diabetic and you oftentimes do have, so many of my patients tell me it's quite amazing. They will say, ma'am, I hated sweets till I turned diabetic. And then I crave sweets every day and I have to have sweets with every meal. So if you are diabetic, we do have sugar sweeteners that are 200 to 2000 times more sweet than sugar. In small quantities, they're completely safe. So if that gives you a bit of satisfaction, that's perfectly fine to have. Now going to the urge part, if that now that can happen to anybody at any age, what we find is that you have to see why this is happening. Usually, if the carbohydrate intake in your food comes down, or you have cut it down or restricted, overall calorie or carbohydrate intake makes you crave sugar. So if that is something you can correct in your diet without any issues, you will automatically overcome the craving. So look at what you do, increase that protein a little bit and see how much carb you're taking. Then you will find that your craving is coming down. Third is sometimes it's an emotional trigger. So these are very, very hard to deal with. The question to ask oneself at that point is, do I really need this? And oftentimes, if you just stay away, it goes away. It's usually a trigger for a period of time. And if you're able to stay away at the time, usually this is in the night when someone said alone night and all of that. That's the very common, or evening time after work. This is where this comes most of the time. If you just stay away for a period of time or substitute with something else, sometimes it goes away. Sometimes it doesn't go away. And even next day, in which case, allow yourself what you're craving for, but portion control it. So don't end up eating, massive amounts of ice cream or something, but portion control it so that your satiety comes in. And with time, your mind is telling you, I want it, but even with small quantities, you can control it. So these are like small tips.
Thank you, ma'am. Here is somebody who's asked another question. I'll actually give it to you again, Dr. Anjana. He's saying, can eating, sorry, just
I
a
can read it.
moment.
Avoiding
Yeah.
sugar and salt, oil is good for health.
Exactly. Yes, yes. That's right.
You obviously cannot avoid all of this completely. So I would like to say, like Gandhiji says, everything in moderation is good for you. We're human beings. We need everything in a little bit of moderation. Sugar gives you a little carb, and oil gives you a little fat, and salt is also needed for the human normal functioning. But the problem comes when everything is in excess of sugar. We have shown that there's a recommendation that added sugar has to stay less than 5% of your total calories, and other than 4 states in the country, nobody is meeting that recommendation. Everybody has excess sugar in their diet by far. So whether you need that excess is the question. Oil, you need for normal oil for cooking and all that is fine, but then if you start eating tablespoons of ghee and coconut oil in the morning and think it's healthy, it's not. Okay, it's saturated fat, and it is going to give you all kinds of issues after that. So anything in excess, you need this in moderate amounts. You don't have to cut. Nothing needs to go to zero. Just moderation is the key.
Thank you. Dr. Praveen, I'm going to give you one question. Somebody here has asked, since you've been talking about having talks with the people before you send them to test. Somebody has said, if eating after eating 6 p.m., I mean, before 6 p.m. is it good for your body? And after 6 p.m. is not good for your body? This is the question that has come up. And this person has been watching YouTube.
Okay. I think, of course, there are a lot of YouTube influencers these days talking about a lot of eating habits, patterns, etc. Of course, the thing is, there is no right or the wrong answers here. But of course, since the question was very specific about 6 p.m., whether eating before is good and eating after is bad. The question is, of course, to understand this, let me give you a briefing about how a metabolism works. Basically, metabolism is the burning capacity of our body. So we eat food and it burns. Like putting fuel into a car, the car burns fuel. Depending on how much the car can burn, the mileage is come. So similar to that, body, if it is a very active, with a healthy body means a very active metabolism is maintained. So the metabolism is usually highest early mornings, like 5 a.m. to 6 a.m. is when our metabolism is at its peak. At this point of time, you can burn whatever you eat, and that is why whenever you do good physical or mental action in the mornings, you are really very effective. So you wake up in the morning, you're hungry, you eat your good breakfast, and because metabolism is quite high in the morning, you burn most of these calories in 2-3 hours. So you start feeling hungry in another 4 hours time. So eat your lunch, and then as you go through the day, the metabolism starts to drop. So by lunch, the metabolism is lower compared to your morning. So that's why when you eat your lunch, unlike your breakfast, you become hungry only after 4-5 hours instead of 2-3 hours that you had in the morning, because your metabolism starts to slow down. And evening, as you start coming, your metabolism drops even further. So as you reach your night, your metabolism comes very low levels. So the more you eat in the night, it's just not going to be metabolized so much. And that is why once you eat your dinner, you're not hungry for the next 12 hours because your metabolism is low. But if you keep your body waked up, there is no metabolism happening in your body. You need some kind of energy to constantly keep coming in, that to feed your body, because the metabolism is very low. So hence, if you actually stop in the evening because your metabolism is low, it's very good. But that means you also stop doing physical or mental work very soon, which is you probably need to end your day by 8 or 8:30 p.m. But if you are a person, I mean, these days, all of us work until 7, 8, something or the other. We keep doing some mental work or physical work even late into the night. If that is going to happen, then by not eating, you're going to feel hungry. You might end up binging into something that might go wrong. So yes, you can stop as early as you can. I wouldn't really say 6 p.m. 6 p.m. might be practically difficult, but as early as you can into the night, and not really eat too much in the night. Keep it very low. And this explains the age-old saying: eat the breakfast like a king, eat the lunch like a prince, and eat your dinner like a pauper. So that explains that principle behind it.
Thank you, Doctor. Dr. Anjana, here's something for you. Dr. Arulmuri Natarajan. He said there's a relative of a child, a baby girl, has actually been not fed salt or sugar. And he wants to know if it is healthy, and baby does not know what the taste of sweet and salt. Maybe even after 2 years. So is it healthy? Is the question.
So habit forming start the first 100 days are very important of life for the palate and habit forming and all of that. So they have for 2 years not fed her salt and sugar. What will happen after 2 years? What will happen when she goes to school? What will happen when there is a birthday party? What will happen when friends are eating? She's not the whole community is not without salt and sugar, isn't it? So what will happen at some point? She will be introduced to salt and sugar, definitely, and at that point the binge will start, the overeating will start, and that excess weight gain that comes has been shown to be more detrimental for children. That sudden increase in weight has been shown to be more detrimental in children for metabolic disease that starts in puberty. So one has to be very, very careful. We do not need to do anything extreme. Just keep it in moderation. So you keep it in controlled amounts instead of cutting it off completely.
Thank you, ma'am. I think we have actually, most of the questions are repetitive. Some are asking about, is it okay to use cold pressed oil instead of what is now available mostly in shops? I think they're more like a whole lot of them, safflower, sunflower, and all those things, which is better. I think we are not talking about nutrition, we are talking about binge eating. So I would not actually like to take those questions are probably a little less relevant. But I had one question for Dr. Lakshmi yesterday. We were discussing this. I was talking about how about this body shaming. A lot of people, actually, I know of some people who actually spoke about one person who was telling me that she wouldn't stop eating, although she knows that she's eating a little more, because she feels that people who are less, probably, I would say, not as heavy set as her, she thinks they are all anorexic. They can just go in for anorexia. Of course, we've been talking a lot about this in this webinar, but I wanted to end with that question. How do we tell our children or the younger generation what exactly is healthy eating, what exactly is healthy lifestyle? How do you change their mindset?
Okay. I think there are two or three bits here. One is about anorexia, then the other one is about how do we encourage our children to eat healthy and have a healthy lifestyle. Maybe I'm going to defer to the other two experts about the healthy eating and lifestyle, and I will focus more on body shaming, if that's okay.
Yeah.
See, I think we as a society, we need to recognize that all of us are much more than just our physical body, right? We all have some form of talents, ability, and we need to move away from focusing on how we look, right? um, Often how we look or what our body shape is determined not just by what we eat. There are lots of factors which contribute to it. Just like if you take our height, we take our eye color, there are multitude of variations in this, which is partly determined by genetics. It's also determined by a lot of other factors. Similarly, our body shape and size is not just determined by whether we are eating or not. So there are lots of factors which determine that. And who we are is not just a product of how we look. So it's very important for all of us to realize that each person's body shape and size is not just something to focus on too much, because it can hurt people, right? It can also cause a sense of preoccupation with food with body shape, and that can become pathological over a period of time. So it's important to respect however people are, right? Just take people as they are. So the way to help our youngsters understand this is to explain that body shape and size varies due to multitude of reasons, and why someone eats or doesn't eat can be determined by different factors. Maybe there are biological reasons, maybe they've been advised by their doctor to follow a specific diet. So it's important to explain to our youngsters that we have to respect each other. We can eat what we want, and how we look is not the way we judge somebody. I don't know if that answers the question and if I got the question right.
No, I'm fine with that. That's exactly what I was looking for. What is, people do have these images of zero size. Of course, that has come down a little bit, I think, now, but the last 10 years, the size zero was something everybody was talking about. And petiteness is.
Yeah, there has been active advocacy in the industry of catwalking, ramp, fashion industry, to steer clear of the zero size. And now you often find that there are specific shops which cater to different body sizes and shapes, and not just to the very media propagated image of how one should look, which I think is a good sign.
Thank you. Thank you all very much. I'm actually going to wrap up here because we've had a wonderful session where we've talked not only about what exactly is the the psychological issue that actually pushes people into binge eating, how you can control your urges. Then we come to what exactly happens when you eat the wrong kind of food at the wrong kind of time, and or if you overeat. Thank you, Dr. Anjana. This revelation about your son's study in school was really very interesting. And to Dr. Praveen, thank you, sir, for giving us information about how exactly you treat a patient who comes to you for bariatric surgery, and that surgery is not the first option. You give them a lot of rope, a long rope, and then everything fails, that we go for bariatric surgery. Thank you very much, all of you. This has been a wonderful session.
Thank you to the Hindu. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.